So we reach the final episode of the Doctor Who miniseries The War Between the Land and the Sea, with the final episode being titled The End of the War. First debuted on the 21st of December 2025. I know I'm like a couple of days late with this, but on the day it was actually going on, I was actually listening to Robert Lloyd Parry read A Warning to the Curious. Which, he's a great man, you should listen to some of his stuff. Anyway, The End of the War was written by Russell T Davies. Did they manage to stick the landing on this fantastic miniseries? For me, not quite. I still think this is a pretty good series, a pretty good miniseries, but the ending, I don't want to say it was botched, maybe just a little bit fumbled. It just wasn't quite as strong as I was hoping it to be. So at the end of the previous story, The Witch of the Waterfall, Barclay Pierre Dupont, played by Russell Tovey, and Salt, the Sea Devil, played by Gugun Batha-Raw, are kind of captured on the bridge. However, Salt is able to escape into the water and ultimately escape from the military. After this, Barclay faces some backlash. Some people want him dead, some people believe he did the right thing, but basically he's put under house arrest and is kind of protected in a hotel. However, he knows that there's a kind of security changeover every so often, so he kind of sneaks out, heads up north every so often, and basically every night to go to the sea and try to contact Salt, although she can't hear him. Meanwhile, the Sea Devils are prepared to follow through on their threat. Although I will admit their threat from the previous episode kind of seems redundant at this point. I mean, Tide mentions that they have Rust on their side, yet the Rust storyline doesn't really ever seem to come back into play. It just seems like it was abandoned, which I do think is a bit of a pity. But the Sea Devils do still make their point across by that they end up capturing a large number of dogs and killing them, which I know some people are going to take offence to. I'd take offence to that, even though I'm a cat owner. But basically, Tide says to them, when they try and argue about killing the dogs and everything, Tide says to them, "You started this," and basically keeps using that point. But the dogs are domesticated, they're our friends. You kill our fish. But the dogs are friendly, so are the fish to us. Which I do kind of understand the point of that. But anyway, I did grow to be a bit worried about Kate Stewart, played once again by Gemma Redgrave, as she is seen attending a therapy appointment, and she asks the therapist whether it would be possible to double her meds, which I know can be very dangerous, as she is shown to still be suffering with quite bad PTSD, especially following the death of Colonel Ibrahim, to which we see kind of moments of her kind of seeing him places where we know he's not there. But ultimately, I will come back to Kate's stuff, but I was beginning to get worried when she asked kind of about that, and then when she effectively blackmails her therapist, saying that if she doesn't listen to her, then she'll reveal about her affair. That's a bit dangerous. But Kate also asks about something called severance, which she knows is something within the halls of government, within the halls of unit, and she just wants to know about it so maybe she can help, although the Prime Minister is still a little reluctant to let her in on it. Anyway, Salt eventually contacts Barley and lets him know that there may be a way out of this, there may be a way to finally stop the war, and she basically tells him all he's got to mention is the word accord. Like, the idea, if he gets accord into the conversation, then the Sea Devils will understand, or Homo Aqua will understand, and they will be able to find a solution from there. Barclay brings it up to the likes of Kate and Shirley Ann Bingham, played once again by Ruth Madeley, and along with their tech staff, they come up with a plan. They know they can't really do it in the kind of big meetings between humanity and Homo Aqua, because humanity will still find a way to kind of squirm around it or avoid it. So they decide to put it out via signals. If they put out kind of special electronic signals that will fire across the world with the word accord in the message, then ultimately Homo Aqua will understand and they will be able to come to an agreement. However, then things take a bit of a dark toll. A dark tone, a dark toll, as suddenly, once they've sent the messages, once everything is Homo Aqua goes quiet, a little too quiet, and then suddenly the bodies of Homo Aqua start appearing up on the shorelines. Like, suddenly millions of Homo Aqua just are dead on our shores. At the next meeting, when Barclay steps up and Salt appears along with them, she reveals that humanity is won. Like, they are prepared to admit defeat. Because it turns out that Severance, the plan for Severance, basically a virus was released into the water and carrying on the bacteria along the waves. It wiped out millions of Homo Aqua. Wiped out a lot of the sea devils. And Barclay, quite rightly, is horrified. Even though Salt reveals that is kind of what it was humanity's hand. Like, ultimately, they were the ones who caused this, and they're not angry. Or at least they're not outwardly angry. They're prepared to do whatever humanity wants. They're prepared to leave them alone. Barclay tries to say that they're prepared to negotiate a certain area of the sea that's about 12 miles deep that Homo Aqua could occupy, and Salt says they're prepared to accept this as long as they call it what it is. Like, the Homo Aqua, they're effectively forced into a hunting ground, basically. A place where, yes, they will be allowed to occupy, but in the end, humanity will seemingly be allowed to hunt them. Anyway, they leave and end up destroying the tank that was built especially for them, causing water to flood the entire area. However, then we come to a point where I'm still not entirely sure what happened. Because Kate is approached by another member of the unit staff who say that Barclay's medical officer has sent a message to them. And it was seen earlier in the episode when Barclay was under house arrest, like he was having his water and his food monitored to make sure there wasn't any poisons in there from people who would try to kill him for what he was doing, but also to check for any messages. And partway through the episode, people in white suits, like white hazmat suits, had come into his hotel room and seemingly done some type of medical experiment on him. I'm still not really sure what that was. Like, it's a bit confusing as to what exactly it was, but basically they get a call, and Kate then escorts him out past the protesters, drives him up north, and it's revealed that Barclay now has gills, and he is able to meet up once again with Salt, and two of them are able to basically swim off into the waters together, which I'll admit I said in the previous episode, The Witch of the Waterfall, that I was a bit hesitant about this being a romantic relationship. I always just preferred it when they were being diplomatic, talking as envoys, the like, but I'll admit I was a little hesitant about this, and just, to me, it's not the strongest ending to have basically humanity get away with genocide, and then just two people who have been fighting just go away together romantically, which feels a little weird. That being said, come the ending, I said in my previous review that I'd read online that Kate may or may not survive this series, and I'm ultimately glad she does survive. Like, as I said, I was hesitant. I was really worried for her when earlier in the episode she was asking about upping her meds, because I know that can be very dangerous. But I am glad that Kate made it to the end of this series. Like, as I said, there were rumours swirling around that Gemma Redgrave was going to be exiting this particular series, but I'm glad that Kate's still around. And as I said in my previous review, they could just do what they did with Kate's father. Basically, if you have to retire Kate, retire her, but then also bring her back in every now and again. When the situation gets really bad, call in Kate. And ultimately, at the end, I feel it's a bit cheesy when Kate is waving goodbye to Barclay and Salt as they swim off into the oceans together, but I'm prepared to let it go. And then you've got the big part at the end where, well, small part at the end, that I know some people are going to be a bit up or down on this, but it's Kate is walking on the beach after having just said goodbye to Barclay and Salt, and she sees a runner running past, and he ends up dropping his water bottle. To which she then says to him, I personally thought at the time that this was going to be like another vision of Colonel Ibrahim for her, but it appears it wasn't. She tells him to pick it up, because doesn't want him littering the beaches. And it's like, what? Like, pick it up. Like, I don't know you. Pick it up. Like, why should I? To which she draws a gun on him and says, pick it up. I don't know, it's funny, but at the same time, it gets the message across. It's a little breachy, but we've got to take care of our coastlines and of our oceans and of our waters. Because if we want to see a better tomorrow, we've got to look after our seas. So, yeah, I'd say for me, The War Between the Land and the Sea, the final episode doesn't quite stick the landing. I wouldn't call it botched, but they could have come up with something a lot stronger or a little less romantic. But overall, I still think The War Between the Land and the Sea, 4 out of 5 episodes were great. 1 episode, a little weak, but overall, I still think The War Between the Land and the Sea was a great addition to the Doctor Who universe. I'd love to see what they can do, and I hope Kate does come back to Doctor Who kind of next series or the like. But until we get a new piece of Doctor Who proper, that's my complete review of The War Between the Land and the Sea. Anyway, also, given this is going out on the 23rd, and it's kind of near enough, I will say this to you all now. Merry Christmas 2025. Anyway, happy holidays everyone, and see you next year.